Um, about a year ago, I gave a Zoom presentation in Mexico regarding my theory of multimodal inferences. And it went very well. It was a very nice audience in Mexico. And however, after it was over, several students asked me in different ways the same sort of question. How do you handle and argue with people on social media? Right? I mean, they were really moved by this. They were troubled by it. Now, I have always quite explicitly said that my research interest is on one-to-one discussion. I claim no expertise in rhetoric, speech making, editorial writing, or anything else like that. It has to do with one-on-one. So where does that leave social media? And because it's really, if you think about it, it's somewhere in between, maybe. So it might be considered a hybrid, but I only use Facebook, and I do Facebook, so I stay in touch with friends. I can wish you guys a happy birthday. Dale and I want you to eat cake and have a fun birthday, so we do this. But that's about all I do, which means that I'm a bit of a fuddy-duddy. Occasionally, a TikTok thing will come across that's really cute or fun, so I look at it. But basically, that's it. Oh, that's what I want. Okay, now we're cooking. Okay, so what we have is a situation in which we have what are known as trolls, and the first and most reviled on the internet are the trolls. Okay? Originally, these were Old Norse giants or demons of the forest. They were mean and harassed travelers. That's from Wikipedia. Nowadays, they do not live in the forests, but in our computers, as you can see. So where they come from? Well, the main thing they do, the main thing they feed on is the Dark Triad. The Dark Triad consists of three things in various versions. Psychopathy, which involves impulsivity, in being emotionally cold, and remorseless. Remember, remorseless. Machiavellianism, self-interested domineering, and narcissism, namely being grandiosity, perceived superiority, and entitlement. Okay? Trolls do not want to have communication. They do not want to engage in argumentative interaction. They are no more governed by they are more governed by the Dark Triad than by anything else. Largely for trolls, these are people who have no interest in communication, but they enjoy terrorizing. There's actually some correlation between trolls and sadism. Quote from Buckles, Trappel et al. Both trolls and sadists feel sadistic glee at the distress of others. Sadists just want to have fun, and the internet is their playground. So what can we say? Well, we say, do not feed the trolls. And frankly, I have no advice for dealing with them. As I said, in 1979, the only way to deal with a fanatic is to ignore them. Basically, don't. Okay? So This is, I'm afraid, by the way, this is going to be part of a theme. So digital hate culture, this is Ganesh, quote, digital hate culture grew out of the swarm tactics of troll subcultures, but has been co-opted for a political purpose with automated accounts or bots adding to existing groups of users seeking to hijack information flows on social media platforms. They go on. Digital hate culture is united by a shared politics of negation against liberalism, egalitarianism, political correctness, and the like, more so than any consistent ideology. So it's not like there's some necessarily consistent theory that's being propounded and put forward by these people, as there is an antagonism against other sorts of things like liberalism. So I'm going to tell you a story, very quick one. This is the Malecon or boardwalk in my village in Mexico. And this past winter I was there, you mostly know I go there every winter. And I was walking along the Malecon. I had my dog, my big black dog, Newly, with me. And she knows where every staircase to the water is. And she, runs and she goes down, wades a bit and comes out. So a gentleman was past me just when Newly was coming out, seemed a bit older than me, so he was really old. And he saw my dog come out of the lake and gave me a withering look. The lake, he said, is loaded with mercury. It'll kill your dog. And my dog's been swimming in that lake for 10 years, but be that as it may. I told him that I had just read in the Guadalajara Reporter, our local newspaper, that the lake had received a clean bill of health with regards to mercury and other toxins. He said, bullshit, and kept walking. And I said, but look at it. He said, bullshit, and kept walking. So ignoring any attempt of mine to converse, he simply kept walking and uttering the word bullshit. Realizing that he had not passed Critical Thinking 101, I shrugged and Newly and I went on our way. Now, the reason that I tell this story has to do with a lack of willingness to change one's mind, a lack of willingness to be open to information. I want to actually go back to some old themes of mine. I'm talking back now in the 80s, when I would talk about cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the feeling we get when we have to change our mind. Right? Most of us can recall some time when we were simply wrong. When you say something, of course, not you, David, I understand, and most of us can remember a time when we said something and someone said, but look, and you say, oh my God, I'm wrong. And that feeling, the feeling, interestingly, is physical. Often you get a little bit perspiry, right? And maybe your breath grabs, and these are physical aspects of what's going on in your body. And it is a dissonance. So this is important. So the theme here is that it's not easy to change your mind. There's a phenomenon here that I'm going to call protectionism. This is our natural tendency, even drive, to protect our beliefs and avoid change. If you allow me, I'm going to avoid a boatload of research and rely instead on two old favorite themes of mine. Quine's Web of Belief from Quine and Julian, and Festinger's theory of cognitive dissonance, which I was just talking about. All I need for my case is the idea that people are reluctant to change their minds and give up closely held beliefs. This is natural, and it's not really criticism worthy. The more important and central the belief is, the harder it is to change our minds. So if I think I have an ophthalmologist appointment on Monday, and my wife says, no, it can't be Monday, that's Thanksgiving. I'll go, oh, shit, let me check. No big deal. No big deal, right? On the other hand, if my wife says, no, Monday's not Thanksgiving, we're not getting together with the whole family, I'm more embedded in this belief, and it takes more to change me. Okay? So I want to introduce something I call vehement epistemic protectionism. When it becomes so strong that we will defend it regardless of anything else, when this happens, the individual goes beyond avoidance and into anger. I mean, that older man on the Malecon was angry at me because I didn't accept his statement. This anger is a function of defensiveness and is exacerbated on social media by the fact that manners do not matter the way they do in face-to-face interaction. I just saw on Facebook today, someone posted, what did you have as a kid? What did everybody have as a kid that they don't have now? Someone posted manners. I remember when our parents, our mothers would give us heck if we were rude. So mind your social media manners. The mechanisms provided to users that allow posting with anonymity or pseudonymity can disinhibit people from social courtesy of filtering or softening communication messages. This is Wang et al. So if you use Facebook, and those of us of a certain age, that's the main thing we use if we use anything. And we know what happens when Facebook decides you're interested in something. You click on an ad, or you buy something. Right? I bought a wallet. A very thin wallet that holds an iPod locator. For weeks after that, I kept getting ads for wallets. Hey, you idiots, I already have it. No. So what I sometimes do is I'll click on an ad that I don't find offensive, like a cruise ad. I like cruise ads, pretty pictures. So that means they're filtering me towards that. So the filters are designed to provide us with information, and specifically ads that we will find interesting. And sometimes, you can still say, I don't like this ad, why? And you have to come up with a reason, like you find it offensive. And then they'll stop. So enter the bubble, right? So we are all more or less in loose bubbles. I have friends who I talk to, and most of them reaffirm my beliefs. And but the bubble now loosely, Nguyen introduced a lot of this in 2018, loosely an epistemic bubble is a social epistemic structure in which some relevant voices have been excluded through omission. Epistemic bubbles can form with no ill intent through ordinary processes of social selection and community information. This is a common term now. However, enter the echo chamber. The echo chamber is something else altogether. It's a social epistemic structure in which other relevant voices have been actively discredited. Echo chambers work by systematically isolating their members from all outside epistemic sources. In epistemic bubbles, Nguyen says, other voices are merely not heard. In echo chambers, other voices are actively undermined. So if you think of the metaphor, an echo chamber, what do you hear? You hear the same things. You hear the echoes of what everyone is saying. And you can't get in a different sort of thing. Okay? So in a bubble, there's like this, right? In a bubble, you have a normal group of individuals, and then you can have a challenger come in and say, wait a minute, I don't like whales, they eat too much plankton. There's news outlets that are relevant and public opinion generally. So epistemic bubbles is an epistemic network that has an adequate coverage through a process of exclusion by omission. The omission need not be malicious or even intentional, but members of that community will not receive all the relevant evidence, nor be exposed to a balanced set of arguments. So I see very, very few arguments, if any, in favor, for example, of Trump or his ilk or MAGA politics. They just don't come across my feed. However, in an echo chamber, nothing is allowed in that smells of disagreement. All opposition is an attack. This is important, okay? Nguyen says, I use echo chamber to mean an epistemic community which creates a significant disparity in trust between members and non-members. This disparity is created by excluding non-members through epistemic discrediting, while simultaneously amplifying members' epistemic credentials. Finally, echo chambers are such that general agreement with some core set of beliefs is a prerequisite for membership, where those core beliefs include beliefs that support that disparity in trust. So you have to subscribe to the beliefs. You have to, if you like, drink the Kool-Aid if you're going to be part of it. Kitchens et al. Talks about echo chambers. They are potent metaphors that encapsulate fear that the use of social media may limit the information that users encounter or consume online, thus failing to promote a shared experience of free-flowing information. Specifically, the concern is that social media algorithms combine with tendencies to interact with like-minded people, others, to create an environment that predominantly exposes users to congenial, opinion-reinforcing content to the exclusion of more diverse, opinion-challenging content. Right? So we tend to hear what we agree with, and we tend to go to places that are there. I mean, many people have given up friends because they were MAGA followers or vice versa. Woomer talks about agential insensitivity. She says, I identify a form of epistemic insensitivity that occurs when an epistemic agent fails to change their beliefs to reflect epistemically relevant facts or evidence that are available to them. And this failure is due to an agent not making proper use of the tools they have for accessing and interpreting evidence. I call this kind of insensitivity agential insensitivity because it stems from the agent's epistemic behavior being a matter of how they use their epistemic tools. Kitchener, Johnson, and Gray also say echo chambers and filter bubbles are potent metaphors that encapsulate widespread public fear that the use of social media may limit the information that users encounter or consume online. thus failing to promote a shared experience of free-flowing information. So there are people who are worried that even when it is fairly benign, that we are being shielded from differences of opinion, from views that do not concur with ours. In the chamber, once in an echo chamber, its defense becomes important. Now, this is something I want to stress now. If you know you are right, why bother to waste time with harping criticism and naysaying? Kelly says it leads to a kind of dogmatism, which it does. Remember, Popper said dogmatism is when nothing will show you're wrong. If you know what you believe is true, then you need to protect it. The stronger you believe it's true, the more you need to protect it. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a very dissonant space. So remember cognitive dissonance when it comes to this. Kelly, 2008. Of course, if I believe the truth about a given question, then a policy of ignoring misleading evidence that bears on that question would seem to be a sensible policy to follow. This would seem to be, follow. Realizing this, I treat my original belief as a reason to dismiss evidence that suggests otherwise on the grounds that such evidence must be misleading. So if there's evidence that does not agree with me, then it has to be wrong. Jamieson and Cappella say few, if any, citizens come to a political season as a blank slate on which they invite leaders to write attitudes. In the complex dance that is the persuasion process, audiences enter the political arena with existing attitudes and preferences. Once there, they are more likely than not to seek out information that is compatible with these beliefs and to shun data that challenge them. So we're in a situation where we're constantly being reinforced. They go on, communication scholars have long wrestled with the complications produced by the fact that meaning exists at the intersection of a context and an audience and a text. From the earliest days of theorizing about persuasion, audience complicity in the act of persuasion has been studied. Aristotle famously argued that the enthymeme in which the audience invests a message with presupposed but unarticulated premises is the soul of persuasion. And more, when confronted with discomforting information, humans readily find ways to reject it. Among other moves, they, and we, apply tests of evidence to it that all but ensure its rejection. By contrast, information that shores up existing attitudes is welcomed uncritically. In short, selective exposure, selective perception, and selective retention pervade the process by which we make sense of who we are as political creatures. So we eschew disconfirming evidence and embrace confirming evidence. As I said, most of you know that I have written at length about what I call familiars. Most of the time, we argue with people we know and who are not strangers. And more, we also argue with them more than once. It's rare that you argue with someone just one time, like the guy on the Malakon. This creates a framework that is pretty much essential to decent argument. Note that I say decent, not good. There are several important aspects of this. The outer circle is quite large and has a dotted line. So you can see, do you see my cursor when I do this? Yeah, okay. And it has a dotted line. And so the border is not solid. So our familiars go from the very closest to family and close friends, to college and classmates, colleagues, acquaintances, and even service personnel. I mean, you have typically a relationship with the guy who fixes your car, and you may not know his politics, and that's not the point. The point is that you're going to watch your ethos. You're going to be nice to him or her because you're going to interact again. You know, it's like the old joke, always be nice to your dentist. And yeah, you don't want to get your dentist angry. I mean, that's not too bright. So all of these things, and there are people who you know because they know other people. So it's quite a huge field of familiars. The outer circle is quite large and has a dotted line rather than a solid line as its border in order to indicate its lack of strict limits. It is within the circle that one is more likely to spend time in the confrontation and opening stages of argument. However, even here, there is information that can be brought to bear to orientate oneself to the dissensual situation. First of all, how do you know this person? Is he a friend of a friend? I mean, you know, if I have a friend who's introduced to me by Dan Cohn or Harvey or Trudy, I'm going to begin by assuming that they're not a MAGA Republican. Could I be wrong? Yes, of course, right? But I'm going to begin with that assumption. The fact is that we use whatever information is available to us in order to argue well and successfully. However, an interaction commences, the individual characteristics will supersede whatever presuppositions might have for a good argument. So once we start arguing, we learn more and more about a person. Okay? And we are ethos sensitive. There's a common store of data, shared background that we take for granted. Secondly, there are values, morals, and standards that are common to us. Okay? When you and I have an argument, we're standing around ISA or OSA or ECHO, whatever it is, I care about what you think about me. You may not always believe that, but I do. And the reason is that we're friends and we're going to be arguing together. Excuse me, many times. So I care what you think about me, and I believe you care what I think about you. Put another way, we are ethos sensitive. Okay? We're paying attention to the ethos. This does not always happen. What happens when none of this applies? People in echo chambers get ostracized, they get trolled, they get verbally beat up, harassed. Well, the two total strangers can, of course, have a perfectly nice and civilized argument. But of course, that's not what interests us. The students who asked me were concerned about was rudeness, manners, and violent reactions. How do you get past that? I wish I knew. So what happens when none of this applies? I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself. Okay. Woomer again. Woomer says that in instances of active forms of ignorance, even when an ignorant subject encounters evidence contrary to their false beliefs, they avoid changing their views. Hence, there's reason to think that actively ignorant agents are somehow participating in their own ignorance. It is this resistance to evidence that the concept of agential insensitivity helps us to understand. So you're actually actively, not you, they are actively blocking things and being ignorant. Look, one of the things that we all felt when Trump was first running was, you know, how can anybody ignore what this guy has done and said? I mean, he's broken every rule. He's broken every ethonic belief that we can imagine, and yet people still voted for him. How can you vote for somebody who is like this? Well, I call it religionation. When we religionize politics, when we make our parties, Democratic or Republican, churches rather than political theories, then we go into the realm of unquestioned belief, dismissal of skeptics, acceptance of arcane explanations. There's no need to understand contradictions. Politics in the US has taken on the trappings of religion. I mean, we have all taught philosophy, and many of us have taught philosophy of religion. So we know there are all of these proofs for the existence and non-existence of God. Has anyone's mind ever changed as a result of it? Perhaps, I don't know, but certainly not largely. And in case you think I'm exaggerating, this was a highway sign. Unto us a son is given, and God help us, it's Trump. Right? Okay. And and then at the under end of the spectrum, there's this. No man, no woman, no commie can stump him. I mean, and you see, the thing that's important to understand is this is how people internally conceive of him and his theories, his beliefs. And in particular, like this picture, he's under attack. They're under attack, and they are under attack. In the relatively recent history of argumentation theory, we know that, for example, Brock-Reed talks about being authentic in argument. Argument is lovers. And one needs a willingness to risk confrontation of a claim with peers. Arguers can't reduce uncertainty very much until their claim meets two tests or confrontation with self and with others. So for Brock-Reed, unless you are willing to risk yourself, and he uses the word self in a very traditional way, that you're not really arguing. My golden rule of argument, argue with someone as you would want to be argued with. And Woomer's agential insensitivity. But what do we do with these? We make accusations. We point fingers. We say, oh, you're bad. And they say, no, you're bad. Or they say, yeah, I know, but I'm right. Okay. And pragma dialectics, we can accuse people of derailing arguments. We can point out fallacies. We can spend days working on one person. We had a talk here months ago by Angel Eduardo, and he talked about working one-on-one with a person to change their beliefs, and that's conceivable. But when you have 50 million people who believe that the last US election was stolen, that's a lot of one-on-one work. So it's impractical, right? And it's not like I have some, serious way. Multimodal argument analysis is just as useless. I wish I could say otherwise. In order to have good, reasonable argument, there is one essential requirement, and that's goodwill. And that's what we're lacking in trolls and echo chambers and even tight bubbles. And there's very little goodwill around these days. So we have the Malodorous mix, the appeal of the Dark Triad, fostered by anonymity. See, one of the things, remember, we're talking about familiars. One of the things that the social media offers is anonymity. You can say something to someone and they don't know who you are. You can be as rude or as blatant as you like. Religionation relies on strong kisseral beliefs. The certainty of being right. If you're right, there's no need for other proof. You know you're right. So you have support within a chamber, and that coagulates the beliefs. Okay, I'm afraid I'm almost done. And ethos insensitivity, no concern for others' feelings. I don't care what you think about me, so I'll say whatever I like. We get millions and millions of people who are unwilling to hear or be open to any news or information that they find disagreeable. So the question becomes, how do we break into the circle? Well, we can rely on the accretion of news, the persistence of disagreement, the demand for justification, one-on-one interaction. But I'm afraid that in the end, there are no solutions. For those of you who don't know what SFA means, ask a teenager. I came into this project, this talk, hoping that I could come up with some brilliant ideas. And I'm extremely frustrated that I have none. I don't think there's anything we can do. Do you? That's it. Thank you. I'm afraid. Kat, will you? Oh, yeah. Please. I wish there was something to applaud.